Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, February 11th. Hope everybody is having a great day so far. In today's show, we go over everything from around the world of football. We have new coaching news, coaching grades from the entire coaching carousel, a mock draft as we officially get into draft season, and the future of the two teams that just finished playing in the Super Bowl. We'll go over all of that and more, but before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, February 11th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our first topic of the day, that being the future of these teams that just finished playing in the Super Bowl. We'll start off with the losers here because I think they have a little bit more interesting conversations around them. That being the Kansas City Chiefs. And the Kansas City Chiefs are a team that just got absolutely destroyed out there, right? They lose 40-22, but that final score makes it look a lot closer than it was. They were down 34-0 at one point, and then it really just became garbage time. Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs went out there and they put on a stinker. But the fact that everyone is going out now and having these wild overreactions about this Chiefs team, that some were crowning the new dynasty, that some were saying Patrick Mahomes, if he had won, would be able to be talked about as the same level, greatest of all time, before he even turned 30. And I think it's a little ridiculous. We need to pump our brakes on that direction. We need to pump our brakes on the other direction as well. Because when a team loses like this, it becomes a little easy to pile on them, right? They didn't have their best game, and they didn't have their best game in their biggest moment. The Eagles were able to get pressure on Patrick Mahomes, but where do they go from here? The Chiefs generally don't have too many key free agents, right? They're still going to be able to have a full arsenal of wide receivers. And Patrick Mahomes has shown in the past that he doesn't need a full arsenal of wide receivers. They traded away one of the best wide receivers in the league in Tyreek Hill, and they were still able to win multiple Super Bowls. They got rid of all of their top weapons, aside from Travis Kelce, and built it back up from scratch to the point where it is now. It doesn't really matter if some of those weapons are leaving because Patrick Mahomes is a guy that's going to continue to build on what he has. He's going to continue to build on what everyone has already done in that building, and I think Travis Kelce is coming back. Now, that's going to be a big one. If Travis Kelce isn't there, we'll see him without his number one option, his number one receiver, a guy that he really has thrown to his entire career if there's no Travis Kelce. But when we're taking a look at what there is left for this Kansas City Chiefs team, they still have that bare bones, whatever brought them to success, right? You're still going to have Mahomes, a Mahomes who is turning 30 now, and now with a chip on his shoulder with something to prove. That's a dangerous thing to have. You have Andy Reid and you have Steve Spagnuolo back again, which is crazy how none of these guys continue to get poached, but this is a team that has a 15-2 coaching staff back again. Continuity is very important, and we've learned how important coaching is in this team. They're still going to have Chris Jones. This game became a lot harder on the Chiefs' defense when their big weapon on the inside, Chris Jones, was not able to go out there and make his plays because he was hurt. He left in the middle of that game. He was dealing with an injury before leaving as doubtful in the third quarter. But Chris Jones will be back. Most of that defense will be back, and crucially, I want everyone to understand this. The Chiefs will be fine. I wrote this in big bold in my notes here. They will be just fine. The Kansas City Chiefs will be. We're talking about a team that has made 3 straight Super Bowls. We're talking about a team that has played in 5 of the last 6 Super Bowls. We're talking about a team that has won 4 of those last 5 Super Bowls. We're talking about a team that has won 3 of the last 5 Super Bowls, and a team that's going to continue to dominate the AFC. No one has really given them a fight in the AFC. They've never made it less than the AFC Championship game with Patrick Mahomes. And may I remind you, Patrick Mahomes, just 29 years old right now. He's not even 30 yet. All these people comparing him to Tom Brady, and all these people saying Tom Brady is never going to be caught ever simply because of this game. I understand he had a bad game, right? And I'm not trying to say that Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the history of football. I'm not trying to say that he's even close to there yet, because he's a guy that I think can deserve to be in these conversations, but he's not at that level yet. It took Tom Brady until he was age 34 to get to 5 Super Bowls. It only took until he was age 29 for Patrick Mahomes, right? They're both 3-2 in their first 5 Super Bowls, and sure, the losses never look like that. But I posit that I don't think Patrick Mahomes ever played a team as good as the Philadelphia Eagles in a Super Bowl. As a defense, as good as that Philadelphia Eagles defense in a Super Bowl. And I think there's levels to this. I think for people to come out and say he'll never catch up, he will never, ever have a chance of being called the GOAT again, is a wild overreaction. And overreactions are fine. But I think we need to understand where it's coming from. It's coming from a spot of annoyance at this Chiefs team. It's coming from a spot of, I can't believe our team wasn't there. Our team wasn't able to beat them. But the big bad wolf was felled this year. They'll be back next year. They'll be fine. They will reload. They have $11 million in cap space, and they have Brett Veach, who's one of the best at doing cap gymnastics. Now, that is something you need to be careful with, because, as we see with the Saints, cap gymnastics will get you into trouble. You keep kicking that can further and further down the road, eventually, you're going to have to pay the piper. But as long as you're winning football games, as long as you aren't going to, as long as you're not going to be a team that's, hemorrhaging money in the negatives for cap space, you will be just fine as long as you're winning games. People will take pay cuts to go to the Chiefs. They're going to pay a heavy Super Bowl tax. They're going to lose some of those linebackers. They might not be as good as they were this year, but I think overall they will be just fine. And anybody saying that the Kansas City Chiefs are not going to be okay are just insane and caught up in the moment. But let me know what your thoughts are. I'd love to hear them. Where do the Kansas City Chiefs go from here? They got to go get some offensive line, right? They have to re-sign their all-pro tackle in Trey Smith. There's a couple guys out there that I think would be good for them. A guy like Ulrich Johnson or Cam Robinson are free agents as well. So there's plenty of tackles for them to get. If they're able to go get those in free agency, this team could be better, and they just shore up that one real weakness they have, which is on the outside offensive line. Maybe they can even get it at the end of the draft. But we'll find out later on in the show what I have them doing there. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, the Eagles, the Super Bowl champions, what are they up to? What does their future look like? A team that right now has very few holes in the roster. How are they going to be able to keep that together? We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows or 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my sound. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, February 11th. If you were just tuning in, excuse me, we just finished going over what the future holds for the Super Bowl losers, the Kansas City Chiefs. In this segment, we go to the other sideline. The Philadelphia Eagles, the Super Bowl champions. What does their future look like? A team that was built to near perfection by Howie Roseman. What does that team look like going forward? We'll talk about that in a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, February 11th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the Philadelphia Eagles side of things. The Eagles went out there and they dominated that game, right? Just like they did all season. After the week 5 bye that they had, they only lost one game. And it was a game that they lost at the last second to Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders, a team that they beat soundly in their next matchup in the NFC Championship game. It was also a game where Jalen Hurts was concussed half of a quarter into it. So we saw Kenny Pickett, who threw a pass in the Super Bowl champion Kenny Pickett. We saw Kenny Pickett lose a game. But other than that, they were flawless in the regular season after their bye week. And the main reason for that is because they stopped committing turnovers. And we can talk on and on about how good this Philadelphia Eagles team was, but they really were a near perfectly built roster. There is a conversation to be had where this Philadelphia Eagles team as a whole stacks up against some of the greatest of all time. You go up and down this roster, the biggest weakness here is what? Jake Elliott? And Jake Elliott is a guy that struggled this season, but in the past has had very solid years, has been able to make some big-time kicks, was perfect in the Super Bowl for them. You have an arguably top 5 quarterback in Jalen Hurts here, a guy that I personally have ranked anywhere from 5 to 7 based on the argument that we're having, right? We also have an offensive line that's one of the top 3 in the NFL. You have a tight end in Dallas Goedert, who's probably a top 10 tight end, a wide receiver room with a top 10 wide receiver in A.J. Brown, and at least a top 20 wide receiver in Devonta Smith, right? You can keep going up and down this roster. Saquon Barkley, the best running back in football this season, who just had, by yardage in playoff games and regular season included, the best running back year in the history of the NFL. You have a defense with all pros at all 3 levels. 2 rookies who went out there and made huge plays. Quinion Mitchell and, of course, Cooper DeJean, who had a pick 6 in the Super Bowl. You have C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who went out there and dominated. Reid Blankenship, who had a couple of big plays throughout this year. Zach Bond, a guy they picked up from New Orleans on a 1-year contract. He's a first-team All-Pro guy. You have Jalen Carter really coming into his own. This is an Eagles team that up and down its roster, you cannot look at me in the face and say seriously that they have a weakness anywhere. This is one of the best teams that I have ever seen in my life. And a lot of those moves that they made were made this season, right? They were able to draft those 2 rookies. They were able to move off of a guy like Jason Kelce, who's one of the best centers in NFL history, and just very simply have a succession plan. They had Cam Jurgens ready to go, and after a little bit of a short start, they were able to get it going, and that offensive line was able to get back to where we expected it to be. They picked up Zach Bond off the street from the Saints, first-team All-Pro. C.J. Gardner-Johnson returns to Philly after 1 year heading over and playing with the Lions. He's also a move that they were able to make this season. Crucially, they were able to sign Saquon Barkley, right? These are all moves. These are all big pieces in their Super Bowl winning formula that were made this offseason by Howie Roseman. Howie Roseman is probably the best GM in football. Howie Roseman is going to be a Hall of Famer as a GM. But this is one of the best teams ever put together. And it's not just that. They were able to completely restock on their coordinators. They went from one of the worst defensive coordinator situations in the league last year to having one of the best, bringing in Vic Fangio after he was a consultant for the Dolphins last season. They also brought in Kellen Moore, who now leaves to be a head coach after what he did this year with the Eagles. goes to the New Orleans Saints. This is a team and a GM and a coach that did everything right this offseason to build a near perfect team. But where do they go from here? Where do the Eagles go from here? First off, it's not going to be a very different Eagles team next season, right? They don't they're only going to lose a couple pieces. Most of their key guys are locked up. There's a couple guys that they do need to get. Zach Bond in particular is someone that I think is very important for them to re-sign. Obviously, he's going to fetch a lot of money. The Super Bowl tax is going to hit them hard. He had an excellent season. But outside of Zach Bond, it's just a bunch of depth pieces, right? Isaiah Rodgers made a big play in the Super Bowl. He's a free agent, but he's not a guy that you have to re-sign. You can get a couple depth pieces over there at corner. You have a probable retirement from Brandon Graham. He's probably not coming back as his contract is up, but if you can convince him to come back off the edge, that would be huge for them as well. You're not going to lose too many key pieces. Offensively, everyone is locked up. Every single player is locked up offensively. There is not a single player that's super important to your roster that the Eagles need to panic and re-sign immediately. This is going to be a team that's going to be very good next year, a juggernaut. Now, there is a trend in the NFC East where no one has won 2 years in a row for over 20 seasons since the Eagles did it back in 03 and 04. Maybe the Eagles can buck the trend this year, but that's going to take a certain team, and this is not going to be a super busy offseason for the Eagles. Maybe they can go out and try to improve this team, but there's not a lot of places for the Eagles, if they look themselves in the mirror, to seriously say, we're going to improve this team drastically. You just won a Super Bowl. You just kind of got to keep things intact. I think the biggest question with this and how you improve it the most, despite everything that Nick Sirianni did, I think he's the weakest link, right? I'm not saying he's a bad coach. Right? I'm not going to sit here and say that Nick Sirianni is a coach that didn't do his job and coach to a Super Bowl, right? He's brought this team to 2 Super Bowls in the last 4 years, right? Ever since he's been hired, he's been nothing but successful aside from dealing with some injuries. But he's also ruffled some feathers in the media, in the fans, with some players as well. This is something that I think that's their weakest link in Philly. And he's not going to go anywhere. And he doesn't need to go anywhere. This is a team that's going to be successful with and probably without him as well. He seems like a guy that everyone in the locker room likes, which is important. But when this team isn't going well, when it doesn't have a superstar cast of wide receivers, quarterbacks, defensive players, offensive line, I'm just not convinced that he's going to be a guy that's going to be able to elevate a team. He's a guy that I think will be able to keep a team with big personalities together because he himself is a big personality, and that's important with this Eagles team. But overall, if there was one big move that I would make with the Eagles heading into the future, there was one move that I looked at and said, this is where you can improve the most. It would be at the head coaching spot. That's not going to be an easy fix though either, because again, he's not necessarily a bad coach either. But let me know what your thoughts are. I'd love to hear them. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, some coaching news. Offensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles, Kellen Moore, has found a new home and now is a head coach in the NFL. We'll talk about what his fit is with the Saints, if it was a good hire, and much more. Coming up next, here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, February 11th. Hope everybody's having a great day so far. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over what the future holds for the two Super Bowl teams, the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. In this segment, we turn our attention to the final stop on the coaching carousel. The final horse has finally been filled, and it is of the New Orleans Saints. Kellen Moore officially takes the job. We talked a little bit about it yesterday, but now let's talk about the fit with him and the Saints. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, February 11th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into Kellen Moore here. Kellen Moore is the final name to be filled in the NFL head coaching carousel, and it took quite a while. We had to wait all the way until after the Super Bowl, but Kellen Moore, the former Cowboys and now Eagles offensive coordinator, finds himself a new home in the Big Easy. Stays there after winning a Super Bowl there on Sunday, officially named the head coach for the New Orleans Saints. Now, a couple things about Kellen Moore. He is 36 years old. He is now the youngest head coach in the NFL as it stands. Not the youngest ever to be hired, but currently the youngest coach in the NFL. This is a good start for this team. Kellen Moore at 36 is a guy that has been praised everywhere. When he started with the Cowboys, he transitioned from a backup quarterback to the offensive to a coach to the offensive coordinator eventually, and he was made such an impression. He was such highly regarded that the Cowboys wanted to keep him around after making a coaching staff change. It was something that Jerry Jones required of Mike McCarthy. Now, eventually, they ended up breaking up, and now he headed over to Philadelphia, where after 1 year in Philadelphia, he's able to get them over the hump, the offensive hump that they were struggling with, and now they win a Super Bowl. They win a Super Bowl over there, and now he heads down to New Orleans. And we talked about why this job was taking so long to fill. Top candidates like Cliff Kingsbury, who reports are that if he had wanted the job was his. Mike McCarthy probably would have been ahead of him there as well with some head coaching experience. But now you get a chance for a young offensive mastermind to go and show what he can do. He's a guy that's been praised for his being able to air the ball out. And one of the things that's been important for him is having a good running back and a good play action game. And I think that's going to translate really well with Derek Carr. Now, this is still Derek Carr. He's not going to be the long-term option. He's not going to be the long-term solution. But when you look at him when he's on play action, and really just quarterbacks in general, when they have that play action, that play fake, some RPO design stuff, not just a traditional 3-step, 5-step, 7-step, whatever amount of step drop back, it's going to make them better. Derek Carr in specific has been really good. Last season, he had a 122.9 QBR when he was doing play action plays. When it wasn't play action, just a normal drop back, he had a 93.5. That is nearly a 30-point QBR jump when he was doing play action. If you look at over his entire career, it's 109 when he's doing play action versus 91, which is about a 20-point jump there. That is still a huge jump when a guy is doing play action versus a guy when he's not. And the other thing, something that his offenses have been praised for and something that he loves to do is air the ball out. We saw it in the Cowboys. We saw it this season when the Eagles were able to air it out to their star receivers down the field. The Saints have been very successful with their big play guys. Rashid Shaheed, before he got hurt, was a massive part of that offense and the reason why they were so successful and so explosive early on in the year. You had the same thing when you had Marquez Valdes-Scantling show up in New Orleans. Whenever those guys were able to make catches and touchdowns of over 50 yards, the Saints didn't lose. They were 3-0 this year in games where they had receiving touchdowns of over 50 yards this season. That's pretty impressive. It's also pretty crazy that it happened 3 times in a season. That's not the easiest thing to do. They have Alvin Kamara. They have the running back. It'd be nice of them if they were able to get someone else back there, but Alvin Kamara is a guy that I think is going to fit really well in his system. He's a guy that likes to be able to use his running backs in an every down kind of role, right? We saw Zeke take up that mantle. We saw Saquon take up that mantle, and now we're going to see a guy in Alvin Kamara take up that mantle. He's a guy that can catch passes, can do it all out of the backfield, and has the ability to run in between tackles. He had a resurgent year last season, and as long as he can stay healthy, this should be a good fit. I really do like the fit for the Saints and Kellen Moore. Now, we talked about it yesterday, being the fact that this is not an ideal situation for anybody to gamble their future, their career on. I'm sure they came to an understanding that this is not going to be a short-term thing. First of all, you have the albatross that is the Derek Carr contract. And Derek Carr is a quarterback that will be able to win you a couple games, right? He's one of those middle-tier quarterbacks anywhere from 15 to 20, 15 to 25 in a given season, right? When you give him a ranking for where he's going to stand as compared to other NFL quarterbacks, he's going to be in that mid-tier. He's not going to be bad, but he's not going to be elite either, right? Derek Carr is a guy that you don't want for a losing team because he's going to make you be a little better than you want to be when you're trying to get these draft picks. But he's also not a guy that you want to develop around for the future. He doesn't fit the timeline. This is a team that needs to just kind of ride out the Derek Carr era, let those contracts go away, pay out all of the extended money that they've given out, all the money that they've deferred into later years, let that all go away, and then they can really consider going into a rebuild, right? They're going to be bad for a little while. As long as the offense can show some stuff. And rumors are that they're going to bring in a former head coach and a defensive guy in Brandon Staley. And Brandon Staley wasn't the best head coach, but when he was a defensive coordinator with the Rams, that Rams team, that Rams defense was pretty good. And I think that's a good start. We talk about all the time what the best combination is. And I think we're starting to see a really good pattern, right? A offensive-minded head coach and a former head coach that's a defensive coordinator. That's generally the best combination. And we're seeing that start to pop up around the league. Liam Cohen hasn't hired his defensive coordinator yet, but I assume he's going to do that with the Jags. Ben Johnson has done that with the Bears. This is going to be something that is going to be very important, picking your staff as a head coach, and I think these guys understand it. I really do like the fit with the Saints and Kellen Moore. I just think it's going to take a bit for everything to work out. And the Saints and a young coach with Kellen Moore. I think hiring a guy that's the youngest coach in the NFL kind of signifies that they're okay with waiting a little bit. They're not going to get a retread. They're not going to go out and get a Bill Belichick or a Pete Carroll or some Mike McCarthy or something because they're going to let the team grow with this head coach. Surround yourself with experience. Just show them something and you should be fine. I do really like this fit for the Saints. We're going to go over grades for not just him, Kellen Moore with the Saints, but every single open coaching hire. There were 7 of them. We will rate them 1 to 7 and give them a letter grade. Get it coming up next when you go over the coaching carousel report card here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found. For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, February 11th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over Kellen Moore being officially hired and named the head coach of the New Orleans Saints. In this segment, we're going to go over everything, all of the 7 hires in the coaching carousel, and do a full report card. Give them a letter grade, talk a little bit about them, and why this fit is good or bad. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, February 11th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the NFL coaching report card here as we officially wrapped up the NFL coaching carousel earlier today. And we're going to start off with our number 7 spot here. And that goes to the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys and Brian Schottenheimer have been together for a little while. He's the offensive coordinator currently. The Cowboys went out and hired him in really a head-scratching move. If anything, this feels like a move for Jerry Jones to just have a pseudo head coach over there as he tries to take a little more control back of this organization. Didn't like the way it was going, and I think they kind of wanted to bring back Mike McCarthy. When ultimately that failed, when they couldn't get the negotiations done for whatever reason that was, they decided to go with his offensive coordinator and continue what had already been in there. That's not a move that I think works really well. First of all, this is a team that's kind of going to be stuck, right? They don't have a lot of money to go out and do what they need to do, which is re-sign Micah Parsons and then also go get some more guys, right? They still have a little bit of work to do as far as trying to build a Super Bowl team. Right now, they're more of a playoff team if they're healthy. We saw that really go and bite them in the butt last season. The health was not there, and they didn't have the depth to do it because they're paying all of these guys so much money. CeeDee Lamb didn't have his breakout as huge of a season as he did the year before, what he got paid for. Bringing in a guy like Brian Schottenheimer just doesn't move me as much as a lot of other moves would, so I'm going to give this move an F for the Cowboys. I think this is the worst coaching hire. It's the most uninspiring coaching hire as well, and I was kind of expecting more, especially after everything that happened with the late firing, letting the contract run out of a guy in Mike McCarthy. Number 6, we have the Raiders, and it's not necessarily that I don't like Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll is a coach that I do like. Pete Carroll is a coach that I think can do a lot, but I also don't think he's going to be there for another 10 years. Generally, when we're looking at coaching hires, we're looking at a guy that can be there for the foreseeable future. You don't want to hire a guy and then get back into the coaching market just a couple years later. And I think Pete Carroll is a guy that can find good success. He needs to find a quarterback, and that's something that Vegas is not going to be able to do this season unless they go find a gem or they're able to continue the magic that the Vikings were able to put on Sam Darnold, as reports are they're interested in a guy like him. This is just a hire that I think is going to be good, right? I like Pete Carroll, but it's not going to change the trajectory of this organization. Pete Carroll did an excellent job in Seattle. He's won basically everywhere he's gone. He's part of an elite club of coaches that have won a national championship in college and a Super Bowl in the NFL, right? That's rarefied air. That's not something that's easy to do. That's something that's very impressive. He's also the oldest head coach. He's older than Bill Belichick is if Bill Belichick was still coaching. He's 73. He doesn't have that much longer to coach, and he looks good. I think he could coach for another 5 years, but you're not hiring a guy just for 5 years. Eventually, he's going to retire. Eventually, he's going to want out. And I just don't like the long-term options of this trade. In the short term, it'll be good. I really do like Pete Carroll as a head coach, and I think he'll be successful. But I don't think his heart is all the way in it. He's still coaching class. He's still teaching classes over at USC while he's a head coach, which isn't necessarily a great sign. I give that move a C+. At number 5, I'm giving it to the Saints. We just talked all about Kellen Moore and his fist with the Saints. I like it. I think it's just going to take a little while, and I'm not convinced they're going to be patient. If they're not patient with Kellen Moore, this is going to be a dumpster fire of a move and a waste of a pretty smart football mind. Kellen Moore, I think, is a good fit, again, if they're patient. Overall, we talked a lot about this move in the last segment if you want to hear my full thoughts, but I'm going to give this one a B-. I love the offensive head coach fit over there. I just want to see how they're able to handle the transition from the end of the Derek Carr era / salary cap sink era, and they get ready for the rebuild. At number 4, I've got the Jets. I really like what I heard from Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn seems like a guy that can really turn this team around, but he's also a defensive-minded guy, which is exactly what they had in Robert Saleh. Robert Saleh's press conference was similarly pretty good when he got introduced. This is a guy that's going to make some sweeping changes. They've already said that they're out on Aaron Rodgers, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's not necessarily a good thing either. They're back to square one, which I think is important. They've got some talent, a very talented defense, and I think Aaron Glenn will be able to turn that defense around, at least stop them from kind of giving up halfway through the season like they did when they fired Robert Saleh, when the Jets fired Robert Saleh. I think that's going to make this defense play at least a lot better than it did this season. But again, I'm not sure how that quarterback search is going to go. They decided to move off of a talented quarterback in Aaron Rodgers, a guy that was at least minimum top 20 quarterback in the NFL in a year where there's not a very good quarterback class and there's not a lot of great quarterback options in free agency either. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me why you move off him this year, aside from, you just needed him out of the locker room, which probably fair. But Aaron Glenn, I think a good hire. I gave him a solid B here. Number 3, I'm giving to the Patriots. And the reason I'm putting Mike Vrabel at number 3 isn't because I don't think he's a good head coach. I think he's done an amazing job. He's won Coach of the Year He's won Coach of the Year before with Tennessee. What he's been able to do with injured rosters, with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback, have been great. But I would have liked to see them go and pursue. They were the first team to hire a coach. They basically had decided they wanted Mike Vrabel. I wanted them to go and pursue an offensive-minded head coach for a quarterback like Drake May. I think it's excellent for a quarterback's development, a young quarterback's development, if he's able to pair himself up with an offensive-minded head coach. And maybe you can get that out of Josh McDaniels, who's coming back. But I'm not so convinced that he's going to be that great offensive mind that's going to be able to help develop a quarterback. That quarterback-head coach relationship is very important. And I think Mike Vrabel is going to do a great job. I do, but I would have liked them to try and go out and even attempt to get a guy like a Ben Johnson, or attempt to go get a guy like a Liam Cohen or a Kellen Moore. Some of these offensive-minded guys that ended up getting hired this cycle. That's what I would have liked to see. Overall, a good hire, still in the top 3, and I'm going to give it a B. At number 2, I'm giving it to the Jaguars and Liam Cohen. I love this move. He had a little bit of an awkward moment in that press conference when he did the Duval, right? But Liam Cohen, I think, is an excellent football mind. He's going to go out there and he's going to work with Trevor Lawrence, and Trevor Lawrence is finally going to have that offensive-minded guy, right? He came in the league with Urban Meyer. Ugh. Then Doug Peterson, who... fine, but he's not going to be that guy that's going to develop. This is going to be a team that is based only around Trevor Lawrence, and it's going to be basically up to him whether or not they're successful. Whether or not Liam Cohen is a successful head coach is going to be how he's going to be able to build around Trevor Lawrence, and I think that's good for Trevor Lawrence. They've paid him like the prince that he is, right? They've paid him that $50+ million contract. He's going to be there for a long time. He is their franchise guy. And they fired Trent Baalke over this, which was the best move anyway. But they made a decisive action. They went out and they got the guy that they liked. They went out and they got the guy that probably is the second best offensive mind here. But he's the second best offensive mind for a reason, and that's why he's at number 2. Overall, a B+ here. And the final grade on the report card goes to the Bears. The Bears, they got the big fish. They got the number 1 option out there. They got Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson, who had been picky in the past, who probably had jobs last coaching cycle, decided, no, I'm going to run it back with the Detroit Lions. Took him not quite as far as last year. They ran into a red-hot Washington team, a team that he probably could have been the head coach of last season if he hadn't turned it down. The Bears go out and they get Ben Johnson. Liam Cohen, I gave him a B+. because he's just like a Walmart version of Ben Johnson in this coaching cycle, at least, right? That's not to say that he's not going to be great, because I think he will. But Ben Johnson was the big fish. The Raiders were all over him. The Bears were all over him. The Jags were all over him. The Jets were all over him. Everybody, this was the number one option aside from the Patriots, right? They all wanted Ben Johnson, and the Bears were able to land him. Now he just needs to develop that playbook with Caleb Williams. And I think that's the best possible thing the Bears could have done. They're able to get Caleb Williams, an offensive-minded guy, the guy that he wanted publicly, and the guy, and generally the Bears aren't able to attract that, but because Caleb Williams is such a big name, because he was such a highly regarded prospect, this is someone that I think Ben Johnson and a lot of other offensive coaches wanted to work with. This is a really good get for them. This can hopefully turn their franchise around. It's been a while since the Bears have been competitive. It's been a while since the Bears have been good, but I love this hire, and I'm going to give it an A. But let me know what your thoughts are. What was the best coaching hire? What grade would you give all 7 of them? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, welcome to draft season, ladies and gentlemen. Mock Draft 2.0 coming up right around the corner. All 32 teams for you. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, February 11th. I hope everybody's having a great day so far. In this segment, we finish up our show getting into draft season. We just finished going over report cards for the coaching carousel as the final coach has been hired. But now it's on to mock draft time. Mock draft 2.0 coming up at you in just a second. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, February 11th. But like I was saying, it's time for the mock draft. The Titans are officially on the clock. The final snap of football has been played. The final tick of the clock is done. And now the Titans are here. A new clock has started. What will they do? In this mock draft, I did no trades. We're probably going to see a couple trades. The Titans have a real possibility of trading out of that number 1 overall pick spot. But for now, we're going to go with no trades, just the order as it is. That is finally was finalized in the last couple of days. At the number 1 overall pick, the Tennessee Titans select quarterback Cam Ward out of the University of Miami. He was the best quarterback on the board, right? I don't see the Titans passing up on a quarterback if they have the number 1 overall pick. I know they've talked all about with their GM saying, hey, we can't pass up a generational talent. That might imply a guy like Travis Hunter. It might even imply a guy like Abdul Carter if they felt like they needed some defense. But what's not going to happen, I just don't see him passing up a quarterback like that. They've seen what happened when Will Levis is your guy, and there's not really an option outside of potentially Aaron Rodgers coming to the Titans where I can see them getting a better quarterback out in the free agency pool. So for now, we're going to give them Cam Ward at the number 1 overall pick. At number 2 overall, the Browns probably are going to trade away Myles Garrett, which means they're going to need their Myles Garrett replacement, and they get that in the edge rusher out of Penn State, Abdul Carter. Probably the most explosive defensive player in the draft this year. He has a lot of speed off the edge. He's an excellent run and pass defender, and I think Abdul Carter is going to be the best defender in this draft. He's going to go to the Browns at 2. They need to find a replacement for Myles Garrett and then deal with that quarterback position. At number 3, the Giants are selecting Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback out of Colorado. This has been maybe one of the worst kept secrets. Shedeur is very confident he's going to the Giants. He's very confident he's not making it out of the top 3, and I think there's good reason for it. The Giants have very publicly seemed to fall in love with Shedeur Sanders. Do I necessarily think he's going to be a generational talent or a guy that's worth taking at number 3? No, I don't think that. But I do think that Shedeur Sanders is a guy that if you're able to give him time, if you're able to just let him develop a little bit, he could be a good quarterback in this league. The issue is the Giants don't have that luxury. They're going to force him out there, and it's not going to be great. But we'll see. At number 4, the Patriots select Travis Hunter, cornerback / wide receiver, also out of Colorado. Travis Hunter was the guy that they were reportedly targeting at number 1 overall, and now he falls into their laps neatly at number 4. He's going to be a special talent. I'm really curious how they're going to use him in the NFL. I want them to be able to play him on both ways, probably not full-time both ways, but it would be cool to see him play, and I think he's got the ability to do it on offense and on defense. At number 5, the Jacksonville Jaguars select Mason Graham, the defensive tackle out of Michigan. Mason Graham is probably the best run stopper in this league, and the Jaguars were an awful run defense last year. Now, that defense has a lot of holes in it, but getting a big body like Mason Graham who can affect both the pass rush and the run defense is going to be a big get for them as they continue to develop the offensive side of the ball. They already have the quarterback. They already have a wide receiver. They already have a stable of running backs. They can maybe get an offensive lineman here, but I think a bigger piece of need is that defense, and I think they go with maybe the best available there at Mason Graham. At 6, the Raiders select Tetro McMillan. That's the best wide receiver left. They need some weapons. Jacoby Myers, as good as he is not a true wide receiver 1. T-Mac is going to come out there and be the best receiver on the board. He's going to go out and dominate in the NFL. He's got prototypical NFL size, speed, and hands, and he's going to be dominant. He had a 300-yard game early on this season with Arizona, who had a disappointing year, but I think he's going to go up and show out in the NFL. The Jets, up at number 7, select Will Campbell, the offensive tackle out of LSU. The best offensive lineman in this class falls right in their lap. They needed a new offensive line. They're probably going to lose a couple of those tackles that they ended up trading for and signing in the last offseason. They need to get some depth there. I think that's their biggest weakness. There's not a quarterback to draft here, so I think they go and take Will Campbell out of LSU. At number 8, the Panthers are on the clock. The Panthers have a lot of needs. Offensive line, defense, I think they need a little more. So I have him taking James Pierce Jr., the edge rusher out of Tennessee. He's going to be an explosive pass rusher. You pair him up with Derek Brown on the inside, it's going to be a huge get, right? Because that defense was just atrocious. If you can get a little more pressure, you can hide the corners a little bit, and I think the edge rusher is probably the most impactful position that they can get. Grabbing a guy like James Pierce Jr. should help a lot. The Saints have Will Johnson fall to them. They traded away Marshawn Lattimore. Will Johnson, the cornerback out of Michigan, is a great fit for them at number 9. I think they'd love that. I think they'd be very happy with that as well. They get that cornerback 1 that can help lock down on the defensive side of the ball. The Bears at number 10, of course, they're going offensive line. They're going to take the biggest offensive tackle out there, the best one probably, in Josh Simmons out of Ohio State. Josh Simmons is a big guy. He's going to be able to protect he's going to be able to protect Caleb Williams a lot better than what an atrocious offensive line that it was when Caleb Williams was playing last season, and that should help tremendously. Getting out of the top 10, at number 11, the 49ers grab an edge rusher in Michael Williams out of Georgia. He's a guy that I think checks off a lot of boxes for them. They get someone on the other side of the defense from Nick Bosa, who could really use that. He's getting a lot of attention, and he hasn't been producing at as high of a rate as he was a couple years ago. Getting another edge rusher on the other side should do wonders for him. The Cowboys at number 12, with Jerry Jones as the GM, they address the biggest need offensively, and that is Ashton Jeanty. They go out and get a running back. Ashton Jeanty, the guy who came second in Heisman voting, out of Boise State, finds a new home with the Dallas Cowboys. A huge get for them. I think that's going to be awesome. I can't wait to see what happens. I have a feeling they're taking a running back here. They could take a defender, but I think overall the best pick for them here is a running back at pick 12. The Dolphins are up next, and I think they shore up that offensive line a little bit. They need to be able to protect Tua, and I think they get Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas. They can move him to guard. He's a big body. They can keep him at tackle, but I think he might fit better as a guard in the NFL. They shore up that interior offensive line. They lost a couple key pieces over there last offseason, and I think that's going to be a huge get for them as they continue to try and protect and build around Tua. At pick 14, the Colts are on the clock. They select Shamar Stewart. Shamar Stewart, the defensive lineman, the defensive tackle out of Texas A&M, is a big athletic guy, and I think he's going to be a guy that I've seen start to rise on some draft boards a little bit. Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M was part of one of the best defensive lines in the entire country. I think he fits really well here. The Colts get another pass rusher, and they desperately need to shore up that defense just a little bit. At 15, the Falcons also desperately need an edge rusher, but this is a draft where there are a whole bunch of them. They get Mike Green, the edge rusher out of Marshall. Marshall, the Sun Belt school. There's a couple guys out of Marshall this year that could be pretty good. They go get Mike Green. He's been going a lot of first-round mocks. He had 17 sacks last season. They need to get pressure on the quarterback. They brought in Matthew Judon. Now they need to continue to surround him with talent and continue to add more and more as they shore up that defense just a little bit more. At number 16, we have the Cardinals. The Cardinals also select a pass rusher in Walter Nolan. Walter Nolan, the defensive tackle out of Ole Miss, is just a big body. They had a run defense that was okay last season, but you go and get that big defensive tackle on the inside. It's going to do wonders for this team that is surprisingly good defense last year. The Bengals are up next, and I've seen a lot of mocks for them to go get a tight end, to go get a wide receiver to replace T. Higgins. But if they don't get a defensive player, I think their fans might riot. So I have them taking Malachi Starks, the safety out of Georgia. He's a guy that can kind of play that Kyle Hamilton role that the Ravens have him doing. Go and play deep, cover receivers, play a little linebacker, go up and cover the run. I think that's going to be huge and be an all-around guy. Malachi Starks out of Georgia to the Bengals at 17. At 18, I have Tyler Booker, the offensive guard of Alabama, going to the Seahawks. They just need an offensive lineman, offensive guard, interior offensive lineman, and he's probably the best one available. It's a little bit high, but you got to get your position of need, and that is by far the biggest need. At number 19, the Buccaneers select Luther Burden II, the wide receiver out of Missouri. He is falling a lot further than I thought he would. This is a guy that I think teams in the back might trade up for. I could see the Steelers trading up for a guy like Luther Burden. Excuse me. I could see a couple teams trading up for a guy like Luther Burden. The Bills could trade up for him if he falls this far. But in a no-trade situation, I think the Bucs, after losing a guy like after losing a very talented receiver in Chris Godwin, can't pass up that opportunity, and they take Luther Burden at number 19. At 20, the Broncos go get a talented player in tight end Tyler Warren, voted the best tight end in the country by AP. Tyler Warren is going to be really good at football. He's kind of going to be able to play a Taysom Hill kind of role without throwing it. That's what he did at Penn State. I'm interested how it's going to translate to the NFL, but they need a tight end. They need more weapons for Bo Nix. Getting a great safety valve like that should be really good. We already talked about how Sean Payton loves a utility guy like a Taysom Hill. I think he'd fit really well over there in Denver. The Steelers get a wide receiver in Emeka Egbuka at number 21. They need a guy to go opposite of George Pickens. Get a guy for probably Justin Fields at their quarterback. Getting an Ohio State talent should be fun to see. I like that pick a lot. They need a wide receiver pretty badly. The Chargers go out and get a corner in Jody Barron from Texas. They need a corner. That's probably one of their biggest needs. You could go out and get another offensive lineman. You can get a wide receiver, but at this point, there's not a wide receiver on this board that really screams you have to get him here. And there's a couple corners that I really like, Jody Barron being my favorite there. I think they pull the trigger, and the Chargers grab him at 22. At 23, the Packers desperately need edge rushers. They get Jack Sawyer out of Ohio State. He had one of the best pass rushing and run stopping grades from PFF this season. He's a very experienced guy, and he's going to be huge for them getting pass rush and speed off the edge. At 24, the Vikings select Benjamin Morrison, the corner from Notre Dame, shore up that defense just a little more. They're going to lose a lot of key pieces, especially in that secondary. Some of their best guys are free agents, and they're not going to be able to sign them all. I think they get a corner out of Notre Dame in Benjamin Morrison. At 25, the Texans are on the clock, and they need offensive line in the worst possible way. They get Armand Membu out of the offensive tackle out of Missouri. He could play guard wherever they need him to go. He is going to be a big athletic guy, and they need that. They desperately need to protect CJ Stroud. That's who the Texans selected 25. At 26, the Rams are taking Jalen Walker, the edge out of Georgia. This is a guy that's played a little off ball. He's a little bit smaller, but on a defensive line as fast and as stacked as the Rams are, he's a guy that could drop back into coverage a little bit, could cause a little chaos for the quarterback. I think that's a good pick for them at number 26. The Ravens get an offensive lineman in Josh Connery Jr. out of Oregon. They just need more offensive line. He's probably the best available out there. There's not a wide receiver that screams the name. The defense shored itself up at the end of last season, so getting some protection for Lamar should be pretty big. The Lions get another edge rusher in Nick Scorton out of Texas A&M. We talked about that Texas A&M offensive line, and at pick 28, there's not a lot of great talent left. There's not a lot of scream you need to get this talent left. There's going to be guys here late in the draft. I like Scourton a lot. He's someone that I think can add a lot coming off the edge next to Aiden Hutchinson. At number 29, the Commanders get their run stopper, defensive tackle Kenneth Grant out of Michigan. He's going to be a big body that can just plug up the middle a little bit next to Johnny Newton, who they drafted this year. That should be a scary run defense next season, and that was their biggest weakness. We saw him really come and bite him in the butt against the Eagles. Getting into pick 30, the Bills select wide receiver Matthew Golden out of Texas. They need another weapon. There's not a lot out Texas. The Chiefs at 31 get a linebacker. I think they're going to lose Nick Bolton in the offseason. He's going to get paid somewhere else. I love Nick Bolton. If they can't get him back, go get Demetrius Knight Jr., the linebacker out of South Carolina. I think he's the best linebacker in this class. He can go out and play run defense, pass defense, and really step up when you lose a really important guy like Nick Bolton was to that defense. And to round out that first round, the Eagles select Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State. The offensive tackle, never hurts to have more of those. Lane Johnson is a guy that I'm not sure how much longer he's going to play. He's still playing great football, but he's getting up there in age. You get a couple retirements over there. I think just getting some more offensive tackle depth is going to be huge for them, and that's who I have the Eagles taking at 32. But let me know what you think of this mock draft. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and thank you everybody so much for tuning in to today's episode of GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We'll be back tomorrow going over everything from around the world of sports, some NBA talk as we do our Wednesday NBA Power Rankings, and much more. You all have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.